Hello Math 24 and welcome to the problem sets. So one of the main things with problem sets is that it's very much like exam questions. These are the types of questions that I would put on a traditional in-person exam. These are the types of things that you definitely need to be able to do in trigonometry. So let's go to it. So for example, number 1, suppose that sine of theta is equal to 4 over 5. So this skill right here is used for number 1 and number 5 and number 6. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So in other words, this is telling you two sides of a right triangle, and then we could use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. So this would be opposite. This one is 4. Hypotenuse is 5. And then we could just use x for the bottom side. So then we would have the Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared, or x squared plus 16 equals 25. That would mean, let's see, subtract 16 from both sides. That means that this is going to be 9. In other words, the missing side is 3. So it turns out this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. And then you could find whichever trig function you want. So tangent of theta would be opposite over adjacent. Cosine of theta. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, 3 over 5. Let's see what else. Secant of theta. Well, that is just this one being inverted, so that's 5 over 3. Cotangent of theta, that would just be this one being inverted, so that's 3 over 4. And quien falta? Cosecant of theta. And that would just be the original one inverted, so that's 5 over 4. Now if it said some particular quadrant, which this one doesn't, but if it did, then you could use a smart trig class to figure out, well, what quadrant are we in? Let's pretend we're in the third quadrant. Then tangent and cotangent would be positive, but all the other ones would be negative. In this one, it didn't say that in the directions, so we just assume that it's in quadrant 1 when it doesn't say. All right, that was fun. How about, for example, number 2? How about you've got this road and it's got an angle of elevation of 60 degrees, which would not be a very safe road. But let's just pretend. So this is the angle of elevation. And then, because this turns out to be a 30, 60, 90, I could say the sides are across from 30, that's going to be 1. Across from 90, that's going to be 2. And across from 60, that's going to be the square root of 3. So then, what's the slope? So slope, so we're doing a little combination of geometry, trigonometry, and even algebra. Slope equals rise over run. So rise would be this one, run would be this one. So the slope would be the square root of 3 over 1. Well, what else would be the square root of 3 over 1? This is the opposite, and this is the adjacent. So opposite over adjacent, that's tangent. So in other words, there's actually 2 ways that you can find slope right here with a right triangle. And that is use rise over run, just like in algebra, or you can use tangent of whatever the angle is, and it will tell you the same answer. So tangent actually gives you slope. So if you had some road that was just barely going up by, let's say, 2 degrees, make my fancy picture right here. So suppose that it's going up by 2 degrees. Then I don't know what the sides are. Literally, I do not know. So that means that I can't do it this way. I have to do it this way. So then I would just say slope, that is tangent of, 2 degrees. And then use my trusty calculator, make sure that it's in degrees. So change the mode. So if you haven't done that before, you go right here to mode. And there's 2 ways to measure angles. There's radians and degrees. So I need to make sure my calculator is in degrees. Also, I like everything to be 3 decimals, so I just set it and forget it. Then go second quit and find out what is tangent of 2 degrees. So the slope would be 0.035 in that example. Now on to one that is very similar to number 4. On this, it's actually called example number 3. Suppose that there's a cat that's stuck in a tree. And it's so scared it can't get down. And the tree happens to be standing up perfectly straight, so that's a 90-degree angle. And the cat is 40 feet off the ground. And then the fire department comes and they start extending their ladder. I know what you're thinking. The fire department really going to come and bring their big truck? Well, yes, because they're going to save this cat. And the thing is, they have a 60-foot ladder. But I'm not going to put 60 on this because I don't know if they have to extend the ladder out completely or not. So I'll just leave this for now, and I'm going to solve for this, and I'll just keep note that they have a 60-foot ladder. And when I solve for x, if it says 65, that means it would only go to here, it will not reach the cat. If I solve for x and it's 55, that means they don't have to stretch the ladder out all the way, just 55 feet. And then for safety reasons, let's say that this angle right here could be no more than 40 degrees. Because of the wind that day, they can't extend the ladder up more than 40 degrees. Okay, so that means that this is opposite and this is hypotenuse. Opposite over hypotenuse, that's sine. So sine of 40 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. Now I need to solve for x. That is a good time to use a red pen. Multiply both sides by x. The left side will then say x times sine of 40 equals 40. And then divide both sides by sine of 40. And then we'll see if the ladder is going to reach the cat. So you need 40 divided by sine of 40. 40 divided by sine of 40. It's 60. Oh no. It's 62.229 feet. So that ladder is going to be about 2.2 feet too short. Well, hopefully they could just then reach out that extra 2 feet and grab the cat and it will be safe. Okay, just one more. So for example number 4 on here, this is sort of like number 6 on the problem set. Suppose that cotangent of theta is equal to a 5. And theta is in quadrant 2. Then find secant of theta. Okay, so what I'm going to do is draw a right triangle, but I need to know what the sides of the triangle are. So I start right here, and first of all, I'm going to make 5 over 1. Next, I'm going to invert this side. 1 over cotangent is equal to tangent. Then I need to also invert this side, so it becomes 1 over 5. Now I'm ready for the right triangle. So tangent is opposite over adjacent. That means the opposite side is 1. The adjacent side is 5. Then solve for the missing side, which I'm going to call c. So c squared equals 1 squared plus 5 squared. That would be 1 plus 25. This, I can even do without my calculator. That's 26. Please hold your applause till the end. So that would be the square root of 26. And with 26, you could factor it as 2 times 3, but it's not going to simplify, so just use the square root of 26. And then also I said use the exact answer, so don't put a decimal right here, just leave it as square root of 26. Now what about secant? Well, secant is 1 over cosine. So cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And then because secant is 1 over that, that means that I need to invert this. So secant is the square root of 26 over 5. Now the last thing to do is decide, do I put a plus sign or a minus sign right here? Smart, trig, class. The directions said we're in quadrant 2. That means that sine is positive and cosine is supposed to be negative. So the final answer is negative square root of 26 over 5.